Thanks for coming to walk with me today. I'm walking at 1.2 miles per hour, and if you track your exercise on any kind of smart device, go ahead and get that started now. Today I'm going to talk to you about my teaching journey, and I'm going to go all the way back to when I first decided I wanted to be a teacher. And that was when I was in first grade. That's how long ago it was. It's actually really interesting to me that I decided I was interested in teaching at that age because I did not want to go to school originally. All my family members were like quite a bit older or younger than me. So growing up, I didn't spend a lot of time with children my age. Once I started school, I did, but prior to that, I was like around adults most of the time, and so I was like afraid to be around children. By the time I started school, my little brother was born, but he was like a baby, so wasn't really used to sharing or working with others, that whole kind of thing. And I never really spent much time away from my family, so thinking about going to school for hours and not seeing anyone I knew was really scary to me. I was really shy as a kid, so I wasn't really excited about that part. But I got to kindergarten, decided I loved it, and then by the time I was in first grade, I really connected with my teacher, and I thought learning was so fun. I really loved the routine and structure of school because at my house, I didn't really feel like there was a lot of that. Like, I didn't really have a bedtime. I kind of just went about and did things, throughout the day like I wanted to, because when you're like 4, that happens. Although some people have routines established by those years, but I did not. So I really loved going to school, knowing exactly like when we were having lunch, when we were having free time, when we were going to learn about X, Y, Z. So I love that, and I'm like, yeah, this will be a good place for me to stay. And I would say I really enjoyed all of my elementary school years except for third grade. Third grade was not my favorite year. I got the teacher I really wanted, and then she went on maternity leave, so I missed out on getting to build a connection with her and really being with her. It felt like she was out for a really long time. Our sub was like a nice lady, but you wait, at that age, you find out who your friends or who your siblings had, and you're really excited to be in their class, and then it was kind of a letdown. So that was a bummer. And my dad also suffered from his first heart attack that year, and I found out that I had asthma that year, although I've grown out of the asthma, so it could have just been one of those circumstantial things. But so that was the first time I had to stay in the hospital. Anyway, all that to say, third grade was not my year, but I loved all the other years of elementary school. So I maintained that I wanted to be a teacher for years and years, probably all the way until high school. And by then I'd been exposed to other careers, and I thought for a while I would possibly be an attorney and maybe eventually a judge. Like, crime and law and justice was really interesting to me. And actually, my mom, she's retired now, but she used to work for the post office. So she had a lot of connections throughout the city, and she knew a judge who was willing to give me an apprenticeship, they had a program. I think it was 16 at the time, and at that time I was still interested in pursuing that type of career, but I also had my first serious boyfriend, and yeah, I didn't really want to give up time to be with him, to go off and learn about my adult career, which wasn't super on my mind at the time. So unfortunately, I missed the boat on that. I do wonder sometimes, how would my life have been had I went to that apprenticeship? Would I had decided to pursue a career in law had I went to that. But I guess we'll never know, and I guess it doesn't matter. But after that, after I'd kind of decided like, oh no, I don't think I'm gonna go that route, I wanted to be a therapist. And actually, I still think that would be a career that I would like. I don't think I'll ever pursue it at this point. And quite frankly, after being a teacher, I definitely felt like a therapist at times. So I'm just going to go ahead and check it off and pretend that I did that. But really what happened was by the time I was a junior in high school, that's the time you're like really getting prepared for college. And I took college prep courses all through high school with plans to go. But it was time to like sign up for the SATs, and it was time to start applying to colleges, and I just did not want to do it. And for someone who loved school so much, the fact that that dream kind of died for me, like now I'm thinking back, like that's really sad. But everyone has their own journey, and I just wasn't ready. I wasn't ready at the time. So pretty much I decided, yeah, sorry mom, I know we've been prepping all these years for me to go to college, but it's not happening, at least not yet. So I found this, I had this idea based on probably like a late night infomercial. And I don't know what the school, or like, I don't know if it was really a school, but basically it was where you could self-pace, complete courses, and get certificates. Like kind of at the very beginning of what I would think of online learning, although they did send me like actual books, but I did components of it online. And I think it was like, you can do this in as little as 6 months, or it could take up to 2 years, that kind of thing. All I know is it took me a lot longer to complete it than I ever intended to. And it's so funny to me, knowing how I am, because I ended up getting my master's degree while I was teaching, and in like within a year, like I really accelerated it. So the fact that I did all of that, but I couldn't be bothered to finish my first part of online schooling for a couple of years, like that really irks me. But we can't change the past, right? So anyway, let me tell you about what that was. I don't recall what the actual certificate was for, but it was something similar to medical billing and coding. I thought it would be really cool to work like in a pediatric clinic, like to manage the office basically, right? Like schedule appointments, check in the children, give them their sticker on the way out the door. Like I'm like, that looks like a really fun, not too high of a stress type of job. And I really wanted to do that. I thought that would be like so fun for years. So I finished my courses, but, and while I was doing that, I'd already graduated high school, and I was working as a key holder, kind of like assistant manager role at a shoe store. And I was doing these courses at the same time, like self-paced, just whenever you want to do it. And I finally got my certificate, and unfortunately I got that at like the height of the recession, and so finding a job was like in that like field, in that role, it wasn't really happening for me. It didn't help that I lived in like, it was, I would call it a small town, some people wouldn't call it a small town, but I think I would call it a small town, but it was an industrial town. So a lot of the opportunities there were to work, like we were the carpet capital of the world, so it was to work like in the carpet industry, whether that was in corporate, whether that was in the carpet mills. Like there were lots of opportunities to do that, but that wasn't something I was trying to pursue. So all that to say, there wasn't a lot of doctors' offices around. Like there's a handful, but again, this wasn't a big town by any means. So the opportunity just wasn't there. So I ended up staying at the shoe store for a while. I had other jobs too. I might come back and talk to about those at some point. But during my time at the shoe store, I think I was there for about 4 years. when I decided, you know what? The only way up here where I am is to be the manager of this place, which was just like the next level. I mean, given you could then become like a district or regional manager. But I knew I'm like, that's not the path I'm looking for. Like, I didn't want to have to work on the weekends. I didn't want to have to work in the evenings. I didn't want to have to work on the holidays. Like, some people like really like that type of like routine or that schedule, but that was not for me. Like, I wanted, remember back to what I said, structure. So I went back to college, and at the time, or I didn't go back, I started college like 4 years after I graduated. So I felt really behind, and I'm like, I don't know really what I want to do. And because of that, I chose to pursue a bachelor's degree in business administration because I'm like, you know what? That's a pretty diverse degree, and I'm sure I could find like a job in different industries with that. And I actually thought, maybe I would work in human resources. I don't think there was, at my community college, there wasn't a degree in human resources, at least not at the time. So I'm like, maybe the business administration degree can kind of lead me into something like human resources. I thought I might like that. So I think I finished like my core classes and was just starting to get into the type of like degree specific classes like accounting and econ. Like that's kind of where I was, like just getting my feet wet in those types of classes. And I just so happened to go on a cruise at that time. And if you've never been on a cruise, when you go to the dining room, if you don't ask to not sit with a group of people, they'll put you with strangers. And I didn't really want that, but the person I was on the cruise with was like, yeah, let's meet new people, adventures, all that. So I was like, all right. So we ended up sitting with a couple, and you sit with the same like group of people or two people, however many people, like every day if you go to the dining room. So we ended up sitting with a couple, and they were just slightly younger than we were. And she was, the girl of the couple was finishing up her bachelor's degree, and she was like talking about it, of course, right? Like that's an exciting time. And she was planning to be a middle school math teacher. And so we talked about that like a lot because I'm like, oh, I used to want to be a teacher. And so we just kind of like chatted about it. And once that conversation happened, I couldn't stop thinking about being a teacher because if you remember, I said like I knew I was going to go back to school, didn't have a very clear direction, had some ideas, was looking for diversity, but like just something like almost clicked in me, like you, like, and I thought like you wanted to be a teacher for so many years, and like maybe this is your sign, right? And I, like I said, I only had like I only worked on like 2 courses in the business administration degree. So I'm like, you know what? If there's a time to switch your major, the time is now. So I got back from the cruise. I don't remember what time of year it was. I don't know if I just ended a semester, if I just started a semester, but I got back and I changed my major to early childhood education. And I just kind of never looked back. And I really, like I mentioned, I felt really behind. Like I really wanted to like speed up this process because I'd waited so long to go to school, and I felt like I should already be living my adult life. And at this time I was still living at home with my mom and my brother, and I'm like, it's time for me to go. So I started taking summer courses. They're really accelerated, and a few of the ones I took were science, and that is not my strong suit. So I don't know how I survived them. I guess I had good study habits and at least a good enough memory to get the answers on paper, because I couldn't tell you too much about it now. But I did that. I kind of like pushed myself to get as far as I could. And then I had about 2 years left of school. And I think at the time I was 24. And I was like, you know what? I need a fresh start. Like, I had recently ended a relationship of 4 years. It was a long distance relationship. And like I mentioned before, I lived in a very industrial town, so there were, of course, there's schools there, but the starting salary was not very good. And I was honestly afraid. I mean, we were still in the recession as I was in college at this time, and I was still afraid that there might not be as many job opportunities for me there. So all those factors made me apply to like a university. It's only like an hour away from where I grew up, so it wasn't too far, but far enough that I would have to move out and grow up a little bit. So that's what I did. And at the time, I also thought that my ex-boyfriend and I, I'm like, oh, you know what? Like, now I live a lot closer. Maybe we'll start dating again and we can have like real dates, because I didn't feel like we ever got to do that living like an hour and a half apart. And now we were probably living 45 minutes apart. So I'm like, oh, you know, like a fresh start for everything. Life will be grand. That never happened. We never started dating again. He had already like fully moved on. So I just kind of started my life fresh there, which was really good. But anyway, towards the end of your like, when you finish like a lot of your courses for teaching, you do a lot of like what we called field experience, like where you're in classrooms. So I did a few weeks in a preschool, like not a public school preschool, but a private school preschool. It was more like a kind of like a daycare, but it went up to like pre-K and kindergarten. And I just observed when I was there, and it was so fun. I really, really enjoyed it. But now that I know a little more, I think it had a lot to do with that teacher, because she really knew how to connect with those 4-year-olds, and like she had stuff down. Like it was a really good experience. After that, I did like a longer term field experience, which lasted a whole semester, and it was in a kindergarten class. And I actually really had a good experience there also. But looking back, I realized that's probably because I was there at the second half of the school year, because I've worked in kindergarten and it didn't feel like that little magical experience I had the first time. So I had my field experience in the kindergarten class for a semester, and towards the end of that, I had to start making decisions about what I would do for my last semester of college. And your last semester, if you're teaching, is student teaching. Like, you don't go to classes anymore. You spend your entire day, like you live life as if you're part of that actual classroom. You start off observing, and then you start doing like little things, and then eventually you like take over the class for the last few weeks. So it was around that time I found out that ex-boyfriend I mentioned was engaged, and that literally broke my heart, because I wasn't even dating anybody, and I'm like, how has he moved on and gotten a full new life, and I'm just like, again, I was feeling very behind. Like, my roommates were younger than me. Like, I just felt like my life should be much more together. So what ended up happening was I went to, like, we all had to go to this big meeting about the study abroad opportunities they had for anybody who was pursuing education. And I remember sitting there thinking, like, I would never, because I tried to stay the night with my friends in my neighborhood growing up. Like, you could see my house from their house, and I would end up calling my mom at like 1 in the morning, like, please go stand on the porch. I just want to come home. That's how homesick I would get. And when I was 13, I went away to this camp for like, it was like 5 days. Day 2, I was calling my mom, please come get me. She did not come get me. She's like, I spent my money, you're staying there, this is good for you. So I did stay. But I just remember thinking, I could never, like, it was hard enough moving away from home. But that turned out to be a good experience, and I felt fine. But like, I'm like, no, I can never. And then I remember one of the last days of class, or like towards the deadline to sign up for study abroad, someone was coming around to all of like our classes like, hey, just a reminder, it's the last opportunity. And I don't know why, probably because I'm so impulsive, I decided I was gonna go. So I ended up moving out of my, like packing everything up, moving out, and I went to Costa Rica to student teach from the end of July through November, through like mid to the end of November, like right before Thanksgiving. And that was a really cool experience. I absolutely adored my mentor teacher. The class I had was amazing. They were fourth grade. This was a private school, a school where the students had a lot of money. The school was very nice. It was pre-K all the way up through high school, like all on one campus. Like you would go to the soccer fields and like it had a track around it. You could walk and you could see the volcanoes and the Costa Rica volcanoes in the background. I really got spoiled at that school. They had like this room you could go to towards the office where they printed. There were these two guys, they were really nice. They printed all your stuff for you. You took what you want or you emailed them what you wanted. If you wanted it in color, if you wanted it in black and white, however many copies you wanted. No questions asked. You didn't have to provide paper, anything. You just took it, you got it. It was so nice. The school was so well maintained and clean. The students wore uniforms. The way they did like your lunch and recess time, I don't remember exactly how long it was, but it was a long time. Like I said, I got very spoiled there. And you didn't have to be on duty every day. Like it rotated. It rotated who was on duty in which area you had. And so you'd have a week or so you had no duty and you had a really long time to like meet with your team and prep and stuff that I didn't really get to do a whole lot of when I came back home and got a job. But I'm noticing that our walking time is already a little longer than it usually is. So I'm gonna stop the video here. But my next video will be part 2, kind of like what happened after school and when I actually started my career teaching journey. But the first part was important too, because you always got to start somewhere. But thank you for walking with me today, and I hope to see you next time.